This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Stories influence, teach, and inspire us. But what about the storytellers who create them? Uncorking a Story profiles storytellers to uncover how their background and life experiences influence the stories they create. We learn what motivates them, their path to success, and what fuels them to keep creating. It all starts by asking one simple question: where does your story begin? Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Now here's your host, Mike Carlin.
Well, hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Will Harris. Will is on a mission to help save the world. He inherited a highly profitable, conventionally run farm from his ancestors, and after many years, he found himself disgusted with the excess, cruelty, and small-town devastation. He decided to make a change to the land on the ground level. He joins me today to discuss his memoir, A Bold Return to Giving a Damn, One Farm, Six Generations, and the Future of Food, in which he shares his groundbreaking, inspiring, and authoritative environmental call to action, where he explores the link between food, health, and climate change. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Will.
Thank you for having me on your show, Mike. Appreciate being here.
Will, I'm happy to have you here. I'm curious. My show always focuses on authors and writers, and I'm curious, where does your story as an author and writer begin?
Well, first of all, to refer to myself as an author and writer, I'm very, very pretentious. One book kind of and it took 70 years for me to get enough stuff put in it. So, which I do. I have had a really good run here on this farm. I inherited the farm and spent my family for 6 generations. I inherited it as a very industrial cattle farm, monocultural cattle farm. It ran it that way and was financially pretty comfortable for 20 years. And then about mid-90s, I started moving away from that model. And I've been moving away from it ever since. And it was, in many ways, the best thing I've ever done. In other ways, it was pretty painful.
Well, what was the impetus for you to start moving away from the model in which the farm had been run for so long?
And the excesses of the industrial model that I had actively pursuing for 20 years. A lot of drugs, subtherapeutic antibiotics, and hormone implants, and phosphorus in the cattle. A lot of pesticides, chemical fertilizers, GMOs in my fields, pastures. And later I figured out the impoverishment of my community. I just, I didn't realize those things. I didn't realize I was a participant. I didn't realize how harmful they were for 20 years, but then when it hit me, it hit me.
How did it hit you? I mean, how did you become aware of the sort of the negative aspects of the way in which this was being run?
I think I probably picked up on it, not because I was particularly sensitive, but because I was a very heavy-handed abuser. If the label instruction on the drug said give them 2 cc's per 100, I probably gave them 3 cc's per 100. And if it said put a pint per acre of the pesticide, I probably put a quart per acre. And was successful in doing it. I made money every year. I went back and looked. I never lost money when I was part of the industrial model. After I left it, I did lose money some years. But and I was loading calves one morning, as I had done hundreds of times in my life. I put 100, 500-pound calves on a double-decker truck. The ones on the top were urinating and defecating, the ones on the bottom, and they were going to be on the truck for 30 hours going to Midwestern feedlot. And it just seemed suddenly very wrong to me. I'd done it hundreds of times, but I just didn't like it anymore. it started. I didn't have a plan to move away from it, but I did immediately started moving away from it. And I've been moving away from it for 30 years, and I'm happier and happier. I can't say I've made more and more money, but I've been happier. And
So it was this, I mean, it sounds like it was like a light switch or a light bulb moment for you. One moment you're doing something you've done hundreds of times before, and the next you're realizing, wow, there's something, inherently wrong with what I'm doing, or something doesn't feel right. And from that point forward, you take steps to change everything.
it really was a light bulb moment. I hadn't used that term before, but yeah, that's what that was. And yes, I started moving away from it, and I've been moving away from it for 30 years. And it's changed dramatically what I do, and it's changed dramatically how I feel about the way we produce food in this country in general.
Well, what if any pushback did you get from the other people involved in that operation? I imagine it takes a lot of people to run an enterprise of that size. Did you face a lot of resistance in those early days?
I was very lucky. I was the only child, and my dad had dementia, moved away from management of the farms, and my wife was a school teacher, not actively involved in the farm. My children were young, so I really didn't have anybody that I needed to bless it. As far as my peer group, I'm sure that I was criticized pretty aggressively there, but it wasn't when I was present, so it's okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, in those early days, you mentioned, never having lost money in the decade since you were running it in the industrial way. And then, of course, you mentioned, making a change, and maybe the money was different. How did you get it to become profitable again, if indeed it was unprofitable at one point?
Well, it was unprofitable at one point. And it was, I was blessed. I did inherit a nice, I was an acre paid for farm, so I had no debt. And as I said, we had made money every year for the 20 years I ran it. And I don't know if my father lost money. He may have. It wasn't much, wasn't very often. So we were fairly stable financially when I started making the changes. And I didn't have to ask anybody. I didn't have, I could borrow money at the bank, I did. And, I'm certainly not debt free today, but from a net worth perspective, we are, made it, survive the storm.
Yeah. Well, what can you share with us about the book? And I love the title, A Bold Return to Giving a Damn. It sounds like that title probably came right out of your mouth. I can't imagine somebody giving you that title.
Yeah, it did. It did. I had a lot of help writing the book. I graduated from the University of Georgia College of Agriculture, so we didn't read many books. We certainly didn't write any books. And that was in 1976, by the way. So I was not a budding author, but Penguin Random House did hire a brilliant young woman to assist me. The title was mine. It's just one of the things that we sit around here for long. And when they were looking for a title, I mentioned that, and they kind of jumped all over it.
That's great. Why was it so important for you to capture this story, or to have this story captured in a book like this?
It really is important to me because I feel like the food production system in this country has evolved into a more and more damaging process. It's very hard on the land. It's very hard on the water, very hard on the climate, very hard on the animals. And it's very hard on the farm families that are managing, that are running the show out here on the ground today. And it's incredibly hard for a farmer to get out of it. I mean, you can quit, but it's very hard to evolve it into a different kind of playbook. And I was extremely fortunate with the timing of what we did. I sold a Whole Foods market and public supermarket the first pound of American grass-fed beef they sold as merchandise as American grass-fed beef. The timing was so fortunate for me. And as a result, we caught traction and did pretty well for a long time. And I really believe that at that time, I believed that I was an early innovator that was part of changing the way we want to produce food in this country. But it hadn't worked out that way. A lot of things have happened to cause it to be harder and harder, most of which involves big food and greenwashing and some government regulations that have been monkeyed with a little bit. So, and really, I have gone from being kind of like a hometown ambassador, urging people to try this way of farming, to not saying too much about it, because I don't want anybody to go broke because I made a recommendation. I was very fortunate when I started. It was the competitive situation was far less onerous, so we made it. But it's hard for me today to try to convince young people to do what we did, even though I think it's the right thing to do.
There's so many of us, who are not farmers. We don't really have a lot of insight into where our food comes from. Like most of us, I think, take it for granted. I know. I go to the butcher and I buy some meat. That's like the extent to which I know about much about where my food comes from. I'm curious to know the link between food health and climate change. Help me understand how those three string together.
All right, well, I will, but let me address what you just said.
Sure.
Your novelty in where your food comes from is very intentional. The big food companies that feed this country don't want you asking many questions. So they paint a picture of how food is produced that is at least okay and probably good. And you have no reason not to believe it unless you do your research and look and see. So that's the problem we've had. That's what we call greenwashing. And big food is incredibly good at it, just remarkably good at it. So, and your next question, I'm going to get that said out loud.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah.
What was your question?
Next question was the link. What is the link between food health and climate change?
Oh, well, it's a direct link. The way we farm in this country is very, very, a very onerous procedure for the land. The land. So the cycles of nature are what we're talking about here. And the cycles of nature are many, and they are cyclical. Industrial food production is very linear. So you have taken a very cyclical process and turned it into a very linear factory process. And it flies in the face of nature. The cycles of nature are, to name a few, the carbon cycle, the water cycle, the mineral cycle, the microbial cycle, on and on, many cycles, many of which we probably don't even know much about. And and when those cycles are operating optimally, they yield an abundance. If you think about the era of the dinosaur, think about the oil and coal and natural gas that's in the ground. that was the abundance that was spun off by nature, when the cycles of nature were operating optimally in the era of the dinosaur. We have taken that, changed it and turned farming into a very linear, destructive process. On my farm here, the organic matter in my soil is about 5.5%. The organic matter in my land, my soil, but when I started this process 20 years ago, was 0.5%. So to go from 0.5% to 5%, that's a 10x increase. Let me just tell you what that does. So 1% organic matter in soil will absorb a 1-inch rain event, about 27,000 gallons of water per acre. So on my farm, that's 5% organic matter, it'll absorb a 5-inch rain event. On my neighbor's soil, which is still a 0.5% organic matter, it won't absorb a 0.5-inch rain event. So all that water that should have been soaked into the land runs downstream, carrying pesticides and topsoil and whatever else with it. I'm about 90 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. And my farm is on that watershed for the Gulf of Mexico. The rain that falls, that runs off my farm and my neighbor's farms, that's where it winds up. When I was growing up, there was a very active oystering industry, wild oysters in the Gulf of Mexico. Not today, there's a moratorium on oystering in the Gulf of Mexico because the oyster beds are in decline because of all the fertilizer and chemical pesticides that have washed off our farm into the Gulf. So to start listing the many ways that this kind of treatment of the land and the animals and the community are just almost endless.
Yeah. I imagine also, just thinking about health. So, climate change and sort of the, just erosion of our natural resources and disrupting, those cycles, is something that you're reversing with, a different way of farming, a more responsible way of farming, but also it must be healthier for those eating your food as well. If there are fewer, hormones going into the meat that you're raising, and of course fewer sort of contaminants going into the environment from things like pesticides and stuff like that. So, can you talk a little bit about the health benefits of farming this way as well?
I can't. It'll be anecdotal. And there's so many experts out there that can tell you. Donald Rogers is a very good one. There's just a number of people out there that can address that with a lot more professionalism. And then, 25 or 30 years ago, I used to try to address the health impacts. And at some point, I realized how stupid I sound trying to claim all that expertise I don't have. So today, what I talk about is the land, water, the welfare of the animal, and the enrichment of America. And I'm really good at those. And I have very strong opinions about the impact of the food on our health. But I really prefer to leave that to the expert.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I would love to hear more than about sort of the enrichment of rural America, because that's also, from where I am, 40 miles outside of New York City, there's not a lot of people think about rural America all that much. Tell me how this is helping rural America.
So I'm sitting in my office, which is the old courthouse. It's a one-room courthouse in the middle of the town of Bluffton, which is in the middle of White Oak Pastures. And Bluffton is the oldest city in this part of in the Creek Indian Treaty that's not on the Navigable Waterway. Bluffton was founded in 1815, very old town. And it was a thriving town in agriculture up until we industrialized. I can go on and on about it, but it had a lot of amenities that old towns didn't have. Very prosperous farming town, but it never had any industry other than agriculture. Didn't have a railroad, didn't have a mine of any sort, didn't have a factory. But when I started making the changes in White Oak Pastures, we were down to about 100 people. They've been much larger. They've been shrinking in population since War II. Today, White Oak Pastures is the largest employer in Clay County, Georgia. The town's in Clay County. And we got about 180 employees that make well over the county average. And Bluffton has gone from literally a ghost town where you could buy nothing except a stamp a couple hours a day to a very nice little town. My employees vie for houses to live in here. We got a restaurant, a store, and the RV park. And this is a very pleasant little town that people want to come to. And the difference is our kind of agriculture causing it to find its vitality again.
What has the response to the book been so far?
Yeah, it's been out for a week, and I don't know too much about it. I've been on the farm all week, so I think my Hood and Lady employees are reading it because I gave it to them. But past that, I don't know too much about it.
There you go.
The folks at Penguin Random House are saying good things. They talk like it's doing pretty good, but I don't know, and I don't know that I thought that everybody in this world was going to read it when I wrote it. But it was just something I needed to get out, and I think there's some things in there that people need to hear about, they need to know about. It's very important. I mean, I'm not saying the book is very important, but this problem we face with our industrialized food production system, it's important. People need to know. And there's a lot of power and money and influence hiding the truth from you.
How did you link up with Penguin Random House?
They called me, and I told them, they got people that do that. And I told them I appreciate it. I'm a writer, and I'm not interested. And they called back and talked to my daughter, and she agreed to do it. She agreed that I would do it. And she explained to me that that's what I was going to do. And I've got two daughters and their spouses that have come back here and are, they were helping me run the company. I think I'm helping them run the company now, but, I don't, that's pretty important. That's pretty important. So, I ought to be fourth generation of males in my family to rule the farm. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father, then me, all pretty alpha, patriarchal, male influence. This is very typical of a southern farm. And I had no idea that my daughters would ever come back. They weren't far. They were raised on the farm, but they didn't farm with me. They went to ballet and softball and singing and piano and whatever else. But when I changed the farm, it created a place for them to come back, but more important, it created the desire to come back. So both of them and their spouses came back, and it's done wonderful things for the farm because it's no longer a patriarchal, ruling, southern alpha male. It's a very, I'm one of the 5 or 6 voices that run the farm. I own it, but I'm no more influential in the operation of it, as this book will prove to you, than my daughters are.
Yeah. Well, I
And it's a lot of damn fun. I'll tell you that too. I mean, it's great.
yeah, I love the notion of them coming back. Having not necessarily, been a part of the operations of it before, and now after you've made this change, it's a desire of theirs to sort of work in there, and just see how the operation and the culture. I'd say the culture of the farm has changed so dramatically.
Dramatic. All of my daughters graduated from college, and I insisted they go somewhere else and work for at least a year, and they did. And they chose to come back, and it just feels very, very natural and healthy to me. And again, when they came back, I put them to running businesses. Everybody here runs certain businesses. We have the store, the restaurant, we have online order fulfillment, and we got just a lot of things going on here that require someone to take ownership of it, have management of it, and they and their spouses, and others. It's not all family. We have some very strong non-family management that's very influential in how we run this business.
Yeah.
All of which is very different from when I ran it by myself as the only decision maker here.
Yeah, I imagine that takes a little pressure off your shoulders as well to have other minds to confer with.
When I blew the business, we sold about $25 million worth of product a year. And I was the only decision maker here. I was just very critically aware that, if something happens to me, we are screwed. I mean, and now delighted to report that if something happens to me, we'll be fine. We'll be just fine. And that's such a relief.
Yeah. You mentioned you make your office in the courthouse. Do you make people call you Your Honor?
People would scoff and scoff and scoff at the idea of calling me Your Honor. I won't tell you what they do call me. I will not get into that. It's a family show.
Oh, very good. On that note, I will say that A Bold Return to Giving a Damn, One Farm, 6 Generations, and the Future of Food can be available wherever books are sold. You can learn more about Will and, of course, White Oak Pastures at whiteoakpastures.com. I'll also put a link to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube in our show notes, so people can find out more information on the operation and the book that way. Will, I want to say thank you for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Thank you so much for having me on your show today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.